All right, let's do another video on velocity versus acceleration and their units, and why there is actually absolutely no mathematical problem to use the unit of acceleration, meters per second per second. All right, I have a very simple way to understand this. All right, let's start with velocity. The unit of velocity, meters per second. All right. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna replace the M and S with a number. Let's say M is 10 and S equals 2. All we want to do is understand the units and the outcome of the units. And we're just going to replace it with numbers to perfectly understand logically, mathematically, why the units make sense. All right. So now we can say that, yeah, the meter is a unit of distance. Second is a unit of time. So we have velocity equals distance divided by time. This is a formula that we can use to calculate distance and velocity. Blah. So yeah, unit of velocity. So yeah, the equation is already in its unit. Meters divided by second. Those are units of distance and time. Meters divided by second, distance divided by time equals velocity. All right, velocity equals meters divided by second equals distance, which is meters divided by time, unit of time equals seconds. So yeah, meters per second equals meters per second. Let's say we have 10 as M for 2, 10 for M and 2 for S. So which is 10 divided by 2 equals 10 divided by 2, 5 equals 5. No problem. It's the same. All right, let's go to acceleration. If we want to know what the velocity is after a certain amount of seconds, then we do velocity equals acceleration times time. Let's say our acceleration is 10 meters per second. So we are gaining 10 meters per second every second. After 3 seconds, our velocity will be 30 meters per second. Now I understand that initially you would say that the only thing you have to do is take your velocity and do it times the amount of seconds. If we're having an acceleration of 10 meters per second, your velocity after 5 seconds will be 50 meters per second. So the only thing you need is 10 meters per second times seconds. There's no need for 10 meters per second per second. But let's take a closer look at it, and it will make sense. So we have velocity, V equals A times T. Velocity, the unit of velocity is meters per second. Meters per second equals the unit of acceleration, conventionally speaking, is meters per second. Times time, unit of time is second. So this is it. Meters per second equals meters per second times second. All right, let's replace them with numbers. 10 for M and 2 for S. So M divided by S, 10 divided by 2 equals 5. All right, let's do it like this. Equals meters per second, 10 per 2, 10 divided by 2. Again, divided by 2. Times 2. Right, next step. 5, 10 divided by 2 equals 5. Right, 10 divided by 2 equals 5. Divided by 2 equals 2.5 times 2 equals 5. So 5 equals 5. Remember, we are now calculating the units, but we have just replaced them with numbers. And so this unit 5 equals this unit 5. It's the same. Velocity, so which means that acceleration times time equals velocity. Meters per second times seconds equals meters per second. And that's mathematically correct. Now, in mathematics, we can do stuff like cancellations. So we have 10 divided by 2 times 2. Divided by 2 times 2 cancels itself out. It's 1. Divided by 2 times 2 is 1. We can cancel this and this. And we are left with this. Because 10 divided by 2 is already 5. We don't have to divide it by 2, 2.5 times 2 equals 5 again. We already have 5 here, 10 divided by 2. So we can delete this, and we're left with 10 over 2 equals 10 over 2. Same way, we can cancel this, or delete this, and what we're left with is meters per second. Meters per second equals meters per second. Velocity equals acceleration times time. Acceleration, meters per second times seconds equals meter per second. Oh. And that's what we want. We want to know the velocity. We have used meters per second times second, and that equals meters per second. All right, so what about meters per second squared instead of per second? Let's do that. So we have, again, meters per second. Velocity is meters per second times acceleration, meters per second squared, which means times itself, seconds times seconds. So meters per second times second squared, times itself, times seconds again. Okay, let's replace them with the numbers again. So you get 10 divided by 2, which is 5, equals 10 divided by 2 times 2 times 2. Okay. That equals 10 divided by 4, which is 2.5, times 2 equals 5. So we have 5 equals 5. Unit 5 equals unit 5. Again, we can do cancellations. We can cancel this, because 10 divided by 2 times 2, that cancels out. It's just 1. Then so we can delete this, and we're left with 10 over 2, which is 5 already. We don't need to do times 2, and then we don't need to do an extra divided by 2 and times 2. They cancel out. So in the same way, cancel out. Meters per second equals meters per second. So acceleration, meters per second squared times seconds equals just meters per second. And that's mathematically correct. All right, so now let's say that it is bullshit. We don't need per second squared. We don't need meters per second. We only need meters per second. Which means we delete this, and this becomes just V. V equals V times T times time. Because yeah, it sounds intuitively logical to say, if you want to know our velocity after a certain amount of seconds, and let's say our acceleration is 10 meters per second every second, we are gaining 10 meters per second every second. So after 5 seconds, we have 50 meters per second. So if we want to know what our velocity is after 5 seconds, we only do 10 meters per second times 5 seconds. right? So that, so it means, which means velocity times time. Let's take a look at the units. So we have meters per second equals meters per second times second. Let's replace them with numbers. So 5 equals 10 meters per second divided by 2 times 2 equals 10 divided by 2 equals 5 times 2 equals 10. We are left with 10. And 10 is m. We are only left with meter, but no meters per second. The same, we have divided by 2 times 2. That cancels out. We are left with 10. The same over here. This cancels out. We are left with m. So if we do meters per second times second, we are left with meters. Just a distance, not a velocity. So that doesn't make sense. That's it. That's all I can give you. It's probably the most simple way to, yeah, mathematically understand this, or mathematically understand the units. Whatever. That's it.